This is the tutorial for CC8NS1, which involves converting decimals that repeat into a reduced fraction. So let's take a look at some problems that we might end up experiencing, starting with the first one here. So 0.321 is repeating. So what it ends up looking like is that 321 you continue to see forever and ever. And so what we want to try to do is write this as a fraction. And when we do that, we're going to use this algebra trick, and it goes this way. You take x, and you set it equal to the part that repeats. So we'll say 0.321, which is repeating. And now what we want to do is we want to cancel out that part that repeats. But we want to save some of the numbers. So we're going to multiply x by a factor of 10. And so when we take a look at 10, we could also multiply, well, when we multiply by 10, it moves the decimal over one space. But I want to move the decimal over 3 spaces. So I'm going to end up having to multiply by 1,000. So if I multiply by 1,000, let's see what happens. And so what I end up with is a 1,000x, and this equals, and I moved the decimal over 3 spaces, so I got that 3.21 or 321, but I still have that 321 repeating because it continues on and on. So the whole idea here, the algebra trick, is to get rid of the part that repeats, and that's what I'm going to end up doing here. So if I go ahead and subtract x, which is the 0.321 repeating, and I'll subtract x from both sides, because what I do to one side of an equation, I have to do to the same thing to the other side. When I do that, the part that repeats cancels out. So I'm just left with the 321 equals, and over here I have 1x take away from 1,000, leaves me with 999x. And so from that point I could go ahead and divide by that 999. So I'll do the same thing on this side. Now, I need to know some common or some factoring rules and some rules that deal with divisibility. And I see one here where I look at the digits 3, 2, and 1. If I sum those together, it makes 6. And I know 3 goes into 6, so I'm going to divide that by 3. And I definitely know 3 goes into this number here, because 3 goes into 9, 3 goes into 9 again, 3 goes into 9 once more. So when I do the division, 321 divided by 3, I get 107. And then 3 goes into 999 333 times. And so that would be the answer. 107 over 333. And again, you can prove it to yourself if you pull up a calculator. And so I'll go ahead and see if I can find one here. Let's go to so I pull up this calculator, and let's go ahead and do that division. 107 divided by, and let's see, there's our division sign, 333. And it equals, and see how the 321, 321, 321, we continue to have that number repeat. So let's go ahead and take a look at the next, a little different. This time the 8 is the only part that repeats. So let's do the same thing. Let's set x equal to 6.08 repeating. This time we only want to cancel out the 8. So I'm going to only multiply by 10 this time. And so if I just multiply by 10, let's see what happens. So I got 10x, the decimal moves over one space, so it becomes 60.8 repeated. Again, I set this equal to x equal to 6.08 repeated, so I got to write down all those numbers when I subtract it from this number here. So I'm going to write 6.08 repeated. So I can go ahead, and since this 8's being repeated here, let's go ahead and bring it out a little bit more. So let me go ahead and erase this little bar up above that and write in another 8. Since that 8's being repeated, I could write it this way. It'll look a little more clear. And so let's go ahead. Now we can see how those 8's are going to cancel out here when I do that subtraction. And I'll have to subtract x from the other side as well, since I have to do the same thing to both sides. Again, x equals the 6.08 repeated is what I'm saying. So again, the whole idea is to cancel out what repeats, and that's what happens here. When I do the subtraction, I'm left with 54.8 equals, and then I get just 9x. So I go ahead and do some division. And whenever I've got a decimal in a fraction, I can multiply by a power of 10. And that'll move the decimal over one space, so I have 548 now over 90. Well, I could just take out that common factor of 2. Divide all numbers by 2, and I end up with this, 274 over 45. And so there's no more common factors, so let's go ahead and just do the division. 45 into this 274. I know it goes 6 times because the number is 6.08. So I just have to multiply these numbers. 30, that makes 24, and 3 makes 27, so I got 4 left over. So I'm going to write the answer as 6 and 4 45ths. And so let's see if that ends up making this number. Let's go ahead and we know it's 6 and 4 45ths, and so if we just do the division of 4 divided by 45, it should make 0.08 repeated. So just the 8 repeats, and that's what happens here. See, 0 and then 8 repeats. The calculator rounded this to a 9, but that continues to repeat forever. So let's try the last one here, and this time we've got 2 numbers repeating at the end. So let's do the same thing. Set x equal to the number you've got. 0.132, and the 32 repeats. So now we want to cancel out the part that repeats. So let's go ahead and multiply just by 100 at this time. The reason why I want to go to 100 is I want to just get that decimal over 2 spaces, and I'll show you why. So we've got 100x equals, now the decimal goes over 2 spaces, so 13 point, and then the 3 repeats. And then I'm going to go ahead and write one more number out. So again, that 32 repeats. So it goes 32, 32, 32. So I got 2 spaces over, then the 2, and then the 32 repeating. So I did that because when I go ahead and subtract what x is 1.132 repeating. So you see I had to move the decimal 2 spaces over to get the part that repeats, to cancel. And so I do the same thing on the other side. I subtract the x. And so let's see what we're left with. We've got 99x equals, and then the part that repeats cancels, which is what we want to happen, but we're left with 13.1. And so we go ahead and do the division. Divide by 99, and here's what happens. So we go ahead and, since we've got a decimal in there, let's go ahead and get rid of that by multiplying by 10. That'll move that decimal over 1 space. It'll make this 990. Now I look for 3 going into it, but these digits 1, 3, and 1 add to make 5, so 3 doesn't go into it. So since they're not even, there's no common factors. Let's just check and see if it's right. So we'll go ahead and divide 131 divided by 990, and we get this, 0.1323232. So the 32 continues to repeat, just as what this problem said initially. So that is changing a rational number with a repeating decimal. So we're converting a decimal expansion, which repeats eventually, so this repeats eventually, into a rational number. Rational number is just writing a number as a fraction. So those are the problems you're going to see on the homework tonight. Good luck.